Hello Internet, it's Daniel with Driving and Dragons. Back today to address the good old-fashioned X, Twitter, YouTube, whatever Internet drama that is surrounding specifically Dungeons and Dragons. Now, 280ZX, we're doing some finishing up, churching up my valve cover. It's fun. It's a fun memory to look back on because it was actually productive. Unlike the valve train, which has given me fits, cannot get this car to hold idle properly, and what I'm starting to think happened is when this car was a daily driver for the previous owner, he probably had some serious issues, took it to a mechanic, and rather than actually fixing it, probably to save money, did a cheapo fix and took everything out of adjustment because it made it work. Even though it didn't run well, it ran, period. And now that I've put everything back into tolerance, now I'm starting to get some issues, whatever issue they were covering up. I'm hoping it's something relatively minor that I can get fixed without having to go too in-depth or even something as bad as starting to replace valves or replacing the entire head. But we'll see as we get to it. So this drama. It really shouldn't be drama, in my opinion, but it has to do with the whole review copy, paid review situation revolving around the new edition of Dungeons and Dragons. And seen the videos, Dungeons Discourse, Professor DM, the D&D Shorts, DM Bloodworth did a great little video on it himself. Jack Law Scholar did a stream on Twitter about it. And it's just a situation that's gotten a little out of hand in my way. And it's because we've gotten into this habit, and this is a common habit in the common era in the modern day, where we like to attach to boogeymen. I'll explain that in just a second, but I've thought about how I was going to address this more than once, several different times and different ways that I wanted to handle this. I actually fully recorded a D&D Reacts video to Professor DM, which I've just turned around and decided not to post because he's one section of this and his thoughts are one section, and they all, regardless of who you're looking at, they all kind of dance around the same issue here. Like I was saying, we have gotten into a culture where boogeymen are something that's really important to us as a group, as a collective. It doesn't matter if it's politics or religion or work or the stock market or tabletop role-playing games or video games. What we have become as a society, and this is not new, it's happened in history many times throughout history, but it's gotten way more prevalent today because just like everything else in the universe, the internet and the age of instant access to information has just dumped gasoline on these fires. And we select these boogeymen, and they are the font of all evil. They are the focal point that allows us to personify and understand the things we don't like and go after them. And in the tabletop role-playing game world, that is Wizards of the Coast. Now, they deserve a boogeyman template, because Wizards of the Coast in general is relatively awful. But just because Wizards of the Coast makes a multitude of unethical, wrong, downright deplorable decisions, both from a very underlying, below the surface level that you only get if you really look for it, such as introducing power creep to Dungeons and Dragons, or really obvious stuff like when they send hired goons to take magic cards back from a YouTuber because of their mistake, or attempting to gaslight the community into thinking that they can somehow bring legal action against them for using their stuff if they don't put it with the OGL, when the OGL was really just acknowledging what the reality of the law already is. Regardless of what it is, Wizards of the Coast has done plenty of bad things in the past. And because we have made them the boogeyman, we have decided that everything they do, even when it's just a normal business practice, has become wrong. And that has brought up this ethical debate over paid reviews or reviews for which you receive a copy. And the arguments range from the theoretical, philosophical, age-old debates of should you ever accept this because bias is wrong, even though everything in the world is biased, whether you're paid or not, all the way up to the more nonsensical when they start talking about, oh, you're totally reliant on this. Because I'm going to tell you right now, Virtually none of the people that Wizards Hasbro handed out their review copies to and asked for these reviews and these advanced copies of the PHP and stuff, virtually none of them are reliant on Wizards of the Coast for their income or even just the success of their YouTube channel or whatever. I'll give you the most obvious example. Generic Jenny D, who is the biggest WOTC shill on the planet. I don't trust a single thing that comes out of her mouth. I think that a lot of people give her way too much grace when it comes to trusting anything she does. And I'm sorry for Professor DM here. I don't know what interviews he was watching, but both the Kyle Brinks and the Jeremy Crawford interview were both the most softball layup WOTC propaganda pieces ever, with just enough patina of Jenny D trying to be a quote-unquote member of the community to cover her own ass. Why? Jenny D got her success from pandering to a specific part of the D&D 5e crowd. She does not need Wizards of the Coast to continue to do that. She can continue to run 5e games. She can continue to run whatever D&D games. It's not like they're going to ban her from ever having a book for her to do the new stuff. They can't stop her from talking. And her 500,000 or 600,000 subscribers that she had them before she got anything from Wizards of the Coast. So no, she is not reliant on Wizards giving her a trip to D&D Castle or a steak dinner up in Seattle to say I'm sorry about the OGL, or letting her play in the playtest group with Jeremy Crawford. She's not reliant on any of that for her channel. Does it add some spice to it? Does it give her something that others don't have? Does it maybe give her a leg up against other large channels sometimes? Maybe a little. But of course, they're also giving the same stuff to all those channels too. So we got to stop this nonsense pretending where it's like, oh my God, if I don't kiss Wizards of the Coast's ass, I'm not going to get the handout for the Player's Handbook when the next edition comes out in 7 years. So I better kiss their ass right now. It's just a ridiculous argument. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of this here, because I'm getting a little rambling and a little off topic on things. There's really 4 types of review out there, and that's what I'm going to focus on here, is talking about reviews. Because I'm going to tell you right now, if we go off on ethics, I've taught professional ethics before. I've got all kinds of certifications in it. I have to take tons of ethics training in my career every single year, and it is something I'm very familiar with. And at the end of the day, if you really want to boil it down to just the boilerplate, ethics is not about morality. Ethics is about fairness. Okay, ethics is not about bias. There's no such bias, and ethics have nothing to do together with each other. What it has to do with is, to be ethical, you must provide a fair playing field or work on a fair playing field within the agreements that we've all made. This is not entirely true. There is a personal level of ethics, and there's a intensely and intrinsically personal component to ethics. But as a general rule, when we talk about ethics, in particular professional ethics, ethics is more about the group and the society as a whole. Morality is more on the personal level. There are plenty of things that are morally abhorrent to, say, me, that are considered ethical and are generally ethical for most of the world, and most people have no problem with them. I, on the other hand, see them as morally abhorrent. As I shouldn't be surprised that the tabletop role-playing game community struggles so hard with the idea of Wizards of the Coast gave me a book to do a review, so therefore it's not, unethical. This is not a true statement here. But when they struggle so hard with alignment because there's a moral axis and then there's an ethical axis, and they just can't get over the concept that morality and ethics, how they intersect and how they can work together and how they can be totally separate. But when you start talking about reviews, there's really, you could say there's 4 reviews, or 4 basic levels. You have unsponsored reviews, where there's absolutely no sponsorship whatsoever. You don't get a free book, you don't get a handout, you don't get a dinner, you don't get any extra access. You go buy the book off the shelf, you read it, or you go get it at the library, you read it, you write your review. Okay? Or you're somebody who does get stuff, but you totally refuse all sponsorship or extra for it. In publishing, there's a thing called advanced review copies, or ARCs. They're incredibly important, especially to newer authors, smaller authors, or in the case of tabletop role-playing games, smaller indie publishers. I'll give you a prime example off my channel. I did a full review of a game called Colonies and Conquerors about a year or so ago. As a matter of fact, I'll make sure I link it in this video. Spirit Bear Studios. I spoke to the guy on Facebook, just ran across him. He sent me PDF copies for me to go through, review, and look at, and I did reviews of them. I didn't get paid a dime. It certainly wasn't worth it, but I'll tell you this right now, even on a super small channel like mine, with only a couple hundred people subbed, there are at least one or two people, I guarantee you, who are listening to this video right now who have never heard of that game before. And the only reason they heard of that game and the only reason that they might go to his website and check it out is because I just said something about it, and that only happened because I had a conversation with him. He said, hey, I'll give you a PDF, if you want to go ahead and review it. He didn't buy my opinion. Now, I may have done something like, say, Professor Dungeon Master would do, and say, I'm not going to post a review unless it's positive. If you ask me to review something and I think it's crap, I'm going to come back to you and say, hey, I really didn't like it, and here's all the reasons why, go fix it, rather than me wreck it all over my channel. But at the same time, it's like my opinion was not bought nor changed because I got that. Now, let's talk about these 4 levels. I already talked about unsponsored. And unsponsored means there's not a monetary exchange. I don't consider an advanced review copy an item of value or some kind of great crazy access, because it's not. It is simply a marketing tactic. You have X number of people who follow you on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. It's a good idea to have you talk about this. I'm going to give it to you so that you can talk about it. Now, I'm giving it to you early, and you're going to sign an NDA, so you can't just jump out there and start talking about it before anybody else. There's not going to be any surprise breaking news, because we want to have our launch, but we also want you to be familiar with it before this happens, so we're going to give it to you. That's not you getting some great thing. I'm going to tell you right now, even Jenny D, who I have no respect for at all, I guarantee you that her opinion on YouTube is not for sale for $30. Because the second her audience starts feeling like she is just a puppet who is saying what Wizards of the Coast tells her to say, she is going to lose all of it. She will lose her value to Wizards of the Coast, and she will lose her value to her listeners or her watchers, and she ain't going to have a YouTube channel anymore. She ain't that stupid. All right, second level, you got sponsored customer. A sponsored customer is somebody who's only going to take sponsorship or products that they're already big supporters of, and they'll drop that sponsor if it changes. This doesn't necessarily have to go only to review books and stuff, but for instance, if I'm a big fan of Castles and Crusades, or if I'm a big fan of, say I'm a huge fan of Cyberpunk Red, which I am, and Artel Saurian offers me a sponsorship, hell, I'll pitch Artel Saurian products at the beginning of every single one of my videos. I really like the product. I don't have a serious problem with the company. They haven't done anything that pissed me off or that I think is outside the lines. So yeah, that's perfectly fine. And if they do something, but if Artel Saurian came out and did something like dump a whole bunch of money or a whole bunch of push behind something that I find morally abhorrent or something that's just totally unacceptable, or if they did something to screw over their customers in a way that was just not acceptable, then all of a sudden it'd be like, sorry, I'm not going to take your check anymore. You're getting cut off my channel, and I'm going to tell everybody why. That's a sponsored customer. Openly sponsored is somebody who's very upfront about being sponsored. This is the third level. This includes giving the benefit of the doubt and maybe casting some things in a favorable light, or even choosing not to get involved in non-product related drama, such as if I were sponsored by Wizards of the Coast, I'm sponsored by Dungeons and Dragons on my channel, I'm talking about D&D. All I'm going to talk about is, I'm not going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, or pandering, or wokeness, or anything like that. All I'm going to talk about is an honest critique of how the new wheelchair mechanics work in the game. I'm not going to get involved in that other stuff. And I'm going to cast everything in a favorable light. I'm going to say, hey, look, there's 2 ways I could take this wheelchair nonsense. The wheelchair mechanics could be them pandering to a small group to try and curry favor with a particular base, or it could be them really trying to do something special for just a small part of the community that opened their mouth. And maybe I'm going to pitch it that way because I'm openly sponsored and I have a bias towards them. I have that great working relationship, and they've always treated me well, so every time they do something, I'm going to always give them the benefit of the doubt. And then you have the fourth level, which is a complete shill. Now, of the first three, none of those are unethical. Having a bias, having a strong bias and even being somebody who is truly paid and gets that income and stuff is not a problem. Where you have an ethical problem is when you don't, like I said, ethics is more about fairness than anything else. And when you choose to be unfair by not giving the audience, the reader, the viewer, or whatever, the opportunity to make their own decisions about your bias and how much it tempers their review or their absorption of what you put out there. So, for instance, if I tell you, hey, I'm sponsored by Wizards of the Coast. I have these books because they gave them to me. I love the guys up there. Yes, I'm a customer too, and I play this game every 3 times a week. And we're going to talk about all the great new stuff that's in there, and it's damn near a commercial as opposed to a review. As long as I'm telling you up front that that's what I am and what this is, there's nothing wrong with that. That's not unethical in any way. But when you get to the level 4, which is a shill, that's where you start to really have a problem. A shill generally doesn't even admit to being sponsored unless they absolutely have to. Like, for instance, if I don't admit to this, I'm going to alienate my fan base, and therefore I'm no longer going to be able to be a shill. All right? The only time they're ever remotely critical is when not being critical would destroy their fan base, or even downplaying it would hurt them. So, for instance, when generic Jenny D came out on the OSL or the OGL debacle, you had people like Professor Dungeon Master and others who were like, man, look at Jenny D. I can't believe she stood up for the people when the time came. She stood up and she took it to Wizards of the Coast. She didn't do anything brave. She didn't go against Wizards of the Coast until everybody else was, and it was perfectly safe. There was no loss. Even Wizards of the Coast wouldn't be able to come back and say, oh, we're going to cut off Jenny D and not give her anything because she came after us on the OGL, because everybody was coming after her. There was no risk and all reward, so you can't really give her a moral benefit for that. I'm also going to pick on Bob Worldbuilder for that. Bob Worldbuilder, I think, has fallen into the more insidious part of being a shill. So, basically, the only bad things that they say amount to, you know what, there's a lot of people who are excited for this, it's all great and everything. This may not be right for my table, but I think it'll be right for you. This is the greatest criticism that they put out. Bob Worldbuilder goes around spending a lot of time trying to act like he's not carrying their water, and it's really disappointing because that's exactly what he's been doing, is carrying their water and making excuses for them. This leads me to believe that he is completely a shill, because he's not being anywhere near open and honest enough about what's going on behind the scenes for some of the changes in tune that he's had. So let's put all that all together, and let's try and put a bow on this. The long and short of it is that it is perfectly ethical to receive review copies. It is perfectly ethical to more or less be an advertisement channel. As long as you are honest about it, you are open about it, and you allow the reader, viewer, whatever, to make their decisions about what your bias is and how your bias is going to affect things. Perfectly acceptable. You don't have to be like D&D Shorts, who basically came out and said, yeah, I got this stuff, but I'm going to donate all the revenue I make off of it to charity. I'm going to put the money away. So this is how you can tell, like, I'm giving this to charity so that you don't have to worry about what money they give me influencing what I say. I'm grateful that they gave it to me, but I'm going to put in this work here, and I'm doing this just to ensure you that I am being more objective and that I am not going to allow myself to be influenced by some kind of monetary gain. That is a very morally sound stance. That is a very strong ethical stance, but it's way further than you need to go to be ethical in this regard. And as a viewer, what you got to do is you look at it and you say, what level of bias does this person have? And are they really any different than they were before? is this a place that's only going to give positive reviews and is going to cast those reviews in a good light? Because, I mean, even your quote-unquote paid review sites, your review boards, that's all they do, and they really are relying on reviews. Well, there's two other things they're relying on. If they're not honest, people don't read them, so they lose their business anyway. They got to be careful in how far they push. And second, Wizards ain't the only game in town. Okay, Wizards may release 7th edition in 8 years, so let's curry favor and kiss up to them. No, they got Troll Lord, and they've got Paizo, and they've got Green Ronin, and they've got every, Artel Saurian and Mongoose, and every other publisher out there who needs them to do their reviews, because their reviews are a form of advertising, and it's not just a WOTC thing. So don't be a hypocrite and sit here and jump all over Wizards of the Coast for doing something that everybody else in the industry has done forever. Don't act like it's a surprise or some special great thing. They're the boogeyman, but in this case, the boogeyman is just going and getting a ham sandwich, and getting a ham sandwich is not evil just because the boogeyman. And don't crawl all over the people who are reviewing it because they got an advanced review copy. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're any less trustworthy or more trustworthy than they were before. Look at where their tune has changed, or if it's changed, and take a look at how much they disclose to you up front. Because if they're telling you, look, I got this, like, the best example of this is when Seth Skorkowski does a module review. They gave me this review in advance in exchange for a fair and honest review of the content of this module. And then he proceeds to go in and talk about it, and trust me, I have listened to him trash a drive-through RPG review module because of the print quality or how they goofed up the maps or something, or hey, this print-on-demand version is obviously a bad scan, it's blurry in some places, you can't search the PDF at all, etc. But he's still a gifted or paid review. He was still given the material in exchange for a fair and honest review, and then he told you, the viewer, I got this in exchange for a fair and honest review. This was given to me. This is a totally ethical way to do this. You have been given the information to know the level of bias. And when he gets on Twitter and he says, for $500,000, I would wrestle Professor DM in a swimming pool filled with spaghetti sauce that's shaped like an ampersand from Wizards of the Coast, it's just saying, hey, if they're shilling out $500,000 to me, I will review their stuff with bells on, and I will tell you everything about it. It'll be a straight up advertisement. There's nothing unethical about that. He's telling you exactly what you're getting. He's not hiding anything from you. He's not deceiving you, and he is not giving you an unfair situation where you rely on information that is unreliable simply because he withheld the information. And that is where it becomes an ethical. So, a little bit rambly, a little bit ranty. This thing has just been so asinine and so irritating that I'm a little incensed about it, just because it's like, Jesus Christ, people, can you please relax on this thing? But tell me what you think down below. Like, share, subscribe. Let's see if we can get to those 1,000 subscribers by Christmas time. I'd really like that. And let me know what I can do to make your gaming experience a little better. What do you guys want to hear about next? Do we need more You're Doing It Wrong? Maybe a few more reviews? And please leave me some recommendations for modules for me to play test my D30 system. Talk to you guys next time.